Yes, hello. I'm Jason Louv, and my guest is Alan Chapman, chaos magician, author of Advanced Magic for Beginners and Magia, and the editor behind a new edition of Aleister Crowley's Magic Without Tears that got his publisher sued by the OTO. We talk about that lawsuit, the real story of the Book of the Law, what magic actually is versus what people think it is, and whether this world is a Bardo that we're just passing through. 2.5 hours. Here it is, and make sure to like and subscribe. Any big news with you?
I mean, not that I can. I can't. What did we? Had I done the Crowley book?
You had, but you weren't talking about it yet.
Had my publisher been sued by the OTO?
Not yet, which we should definitely talk about.
Okay. Yes. So that happened. It starts with my publisher asking me if I would like to edit a Crowley book because all of his work had come out of copyright. And I thought I could do one better. And I said, I'll do a 10-volume collected magical works, and introduce his work to a new generation. And I wanted to start with Magic Without Tears. And so I managed to get all the unabridged versions of the letters, including a letter that had never been published before. I categorized it in the way that he initially intended with the work. And at the time, there were a couple of letters in there that were... There was some contention around whether or not Crowley had written those letters. And these letters were the source of a big drama around Crowley being racist and so on. This kicked off, I think it was in the late teens. This all came out and was a thing. Anyway, it turns out that it was a guy called Gerard Ormont who'd written 3 of these letters. And Israel Regardie claimed that Crowley had actually written those letters and it was a pen name of his. We now know that wasn't true. It was written by this French dude who was, he had some right-wing leanings, let's put it that way. Right, so that was included in the letters. Now, I flagged this with my publisher because the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, they had bought Gerard Ormont's estate, right? So that they could, essentially, I think it was damage control, so that they could stop people from publishing his material and claiming that it was Crowley's, right? So they're trying to defend Crowley's brand, something like that, right? So they'd purchased the estate, and so they had the copyright for those letters. So I flagged this as an issue in the beginning, like this might be a problem with the volume having these letters. Eventually, we took those letters out, and I rewrote the content, but This question around the copyright came up again, and there's a backstory, which is Crowley didn't discharge his estate properly when he died, which we could get really into the weeds, but I'll try and make it very, very simple. Which is I think it was in the 70s, perhaps it was in the 70s, I think, when Kenneth Grant had published a couple of Crowley's works, and he went for a meal with the head of the OTO, William Breeze, and he divulged that there hadn't been this proper legal what's the word that I just used? Discharging of his estate, right? So Breeze went round Kenneth Grant's back and bought up the copyright, right? And what this essentially means in the end is that anything published in Crowley's lifetime had come out of copyright, but anything that wasn't published in his lifetime is not out of copyright.
What does that include?
So it includes things like Magic Without Tears, all the letters in Magic Without Tears. The Book of Thoth is that's complicated as well because of the image copyright stuff around that. But it's essentially anything he didn't publish in his lifetime. So that would include the Book of Wisdom or Folly.
Okay.
It would include the Comment D for the Book of the Law. It would include all the Chinese works, or some of the Chinese works, and so on. Anyway, so it. my publisher in the end, we got right up to sending the book to the printers, and we'd finished everything. So the end papers, the cover, the whole thing, and I'd spent about 9 months, let's say, writing this introduction to Crowley that was going to be included in the book as an introduction. It got right to the line, and then my publisher had to refrain from publishing the book. All of the people involved in the distribution of the book, they were warned by the OTO and so on.
Does that mean they actually did they actually have to destroy the books?
Well, they hadn't actually been printed. It got right up to the point where it was about to be printed. So we had lots of pre-orders.
Okay.
But all the work was finished. I cannot tell you the amount of work that was involved in editing those letters.
Probably multiple years, right?
It was a lot. There was over 400 footnotes just for the letters to explain everything that Crowley's saying. Like the turns of phrase that he uses and that kind of a thing.
Yes, I spent last night rereading your extensive footnotes for your essay.
And then that's for the essay. That's a separate thing. Yeah, those are the separate footnotes for the essay. Yeah. So it was a lot of work. So unfortunately that happened, and let's just say the OTO can make more money doing that than they can ever from the sales of Crowley's books. So anyway,
interesting. Okay.
So that happened, and then there's the question around there are other countries with different copyright laws. So is it possible to publish this work elsewhere? The problem is who's willing to put the money on the line to do that? So after I sat on it for a while, and then after a bit, I thought, I'm just going to release the introductory essay. I'll just put that out there for free because I'm tired of sitting on it. Because the essay presents a different view of Crowley than the conventional one,
right?
You might say,
right. Yeah. And I was gonna say, well, let's just start with the essay. So I've read this a couple times now. I think it's a tremendous piece of writing and very well written.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
It's very enjoyable to read somebody who actually cares about style, has been inspired by the best of Crowley.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I have greatly enjoyed. I've been greatly enjoyed it, and have a lot of notes here. So, of course, I would love to know, and I'm sure people watching would love to know the contents of the extra letters that went into Magick Without Tears. But also, in addition to that, even though those are not out, it seems like you were transformed by working on this project and then distilled it into this essay potentially.
Yeah, it's difficult to distinguish where my path ends and Crowley's begins in terms of that essay, because really, when I make it sound like my publisher just had this idea, and I was like, oh, that's a great idea, but the thing that I've always been following, right, but this led me to practice magic in the first place, following this thread, if you like, that led me to do this work on Crowley. It led in that direction. And at the time I was thinking, why am I doing this work on Crowley, given that I have so much stuff of my own to be working on? I had so much stuff to do. And it transpires that there is a lot under the surface with Crowley that is essential to the work that I'm doing with my own teaching, with my own practice. So connections with a particular deity and tradition, and discovering that in some senses what happened to Crowley, where he finds himself coming into contact with a tradition where he doesn't necessarily understand the nature of the tradition, but he gets the fruits promised by that tradition despite not understanding that, right? Which demonstrates a reality to that tradition. I found the same thing happening with myself, except the difference being, and you see this in the essay, which is there's rather than it remaining obscured, it's being revealed or being demonstrated.
Okay,
if that makes sense. Yes. So it was. I mean, it was a phenomenal amount of work. It was like excavation work. It was like digging down a layer, and then me thinking this is the story, and then writing, and then realizing no, this isn't it yet. Keep digging. You know, it was a phenomenal amount.
You think you got to the bottom layer?
I think I got to the bottom. I think I got to the layer that's the most important layer. There is still more depth there that's still unfolding. So there's more stuff for me to say about Crowley. There's a whole. Well, there was going to be, this series of books, and I was going to write an introductory essay for each book. And so content that would have gone as a preface before other works, hasn't been included in that essay. And there's, there are, 1,000 more riddles to do with Crowley that have been solved that are not in that essay. Things around the Lamb portrait, like who is Lamb? Right, in his famous portrait that looks like a grey alien, like who is that? Where does it come from? What's the nature of the mystical experience that he has on East Pass Island that he won't describe, but he gives hints in his autobiography and so on and so forth. Things of that nature. So I mean, at the moment I'm thinking that I will just write a book with that content.
Okay.
Describing some of that stuff. But
wonderful.
Yeah, I'll probably touch on some stuff as well that's not included in that essay in this conversation. Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend actually this week and saying the book on Crowley really hasn't been written yet because, as you mentioned in this essay, people are kind of like knee-jerk reactive to him or like kind of blindly sycophantic. And it's really hard to discern the reality of what's going on there. But
well, you say that, but as you know yourself, sometimes it's just written very plainly on the page.
Yeah,
and it's strange that it goes unread. So what I'm referencing there, of course, is you feature in the notes. I mentioned your work in the notes.
Yes, I noticed. Not for the happiest of things, unfortunately, but yes.
No, but it's a great example, which is and it's an extreme example, which perhaps makes it the most illustrative. Which is, you read his diaries from the 1920s. You come across this passage. That's this. As you describe it, it's like this screed. It's extremely bad writing, just on the stylistically, like just how it is. The content is, it's sadomasochistic, and then he even talks about doing, unspeakable things involving children. Right,
that we can't talk about on YouTube.
No,
not mention on YouTube.
Yeah. Nor would we need to. But it's this, and it's an anomaly in the diary, so it stands out. It's only a few pages later in the diary that he has this exposition on Buddhism and Hinduism, which is just extraordinary. There's an extraordinary, like, masterful comprehension of those two systems. Like, I
think that I still think that Liber E is the best thing ever written about yoga. Yeah. Like, it's like, and meditation, like, still. Like, he on that subject, and 8 lectures on yoga is so good.
Yeah, so
he
good.
is just and he got it from Alan Bennett. But it's like his explanation of it is still better than like anything you can get from like Swamis and things like that. What do you make of that? Have you come to any thoughts on that? I mean, that passage was shown to me by Maria Montgomery, who is a friend of mine, who was a student of David Richard Jones, the Enochian Magick guy, and their friend Keith 418, who's I guess a kind of a gadfly who posts anti OTO screeds quite a bit online. He had found this.
Yes.
Right. And so that's where it came from. It's right there in plain sight. It's in Magical Diaries of the Beast 666. Hard to miss it. Big red book with the letter 666 on it. You think that if you were going to discredit Crowley, you would go to that book, right? And it's not even a footnote. It's just there on page.
And the editor is, John Simmons, whose whole career is based on giving the worst possible view.
Is it Simmons or Simons? Because when I interviewed Tobias Churton, I kept saying Simmons, and he kept correcting me to Simons. So now I have to know which one it is.
I'm going to go with Simmons.
Okay, good. All right.
I don't know.
Feeling good already. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Simons. Crowley. Yeah. Anyway, yes, that guy. I mean, that guy his whole career is based on giving the worst possible view of Crowley that's possible. It's so extraordinary that he can edit this material and then never mention it. I mean, it's gold, isn't it, for his project? It's so bizarre.
Yeah, and it's not like people haven't sought to discredit it. You would think that the church would have found it.
Just anyone. Just anyone.
Like literally anyone. It's like, it's not like the guy is not well known as, I saw a hilarious thing on Twitter where it's like, I used to think that Aleister Crowley was evil on the level of Hitler, and then I realized he was just another annoying bisexual drug addict. Which is kind of true, but yeah.
Yes, well, some of that is true with this passage, because the passage is he beforehand he states very clearly, right, and it's a thinly veiled excuse, but it's like he's going to do an experiment to see how long he can stay awake using cocaine, and then he takes a phenomenal amount of ether at the same time, and then he's been awake for like
turn into a Richard Pryor joke. But yes, right.
But then he's awake for like 2 days in a very different state of mind, and he's just been through. And I detail this in the essay. He's just been through, he's touched rock bottom with his sadomasochistic experiments with his girlfriend, who tortured him with cigarettes, and I mean all kinds of things. Made him eat her excrement. It's this level of what can we say?
Edgelording.
Trying to, how would he put it? Trying to overcome the disgust reflex, right?
Okay.
But there's other stuff going on there. There's, these are his particular shadows, sadomasochistic shadows that, to a certain extent, a lot of people that worked with him had complementary. What can we say? Shadows that would go along with it to play, to play these things out.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, but that's the thing that people always forget about Crowley or any given spiritual teacher. These people are adults. You don't just end up in Sicily, like falling apart crack house.
Yeah,
with no volition, no personal volition whatsoever. There's a lot of steps that have to happen before you get there.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, in this particular instance, I mean, his girlfriend is the sadist.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one inflicting the pain on Crowley. And so he's just been through that, and this insane screed. If anything, it's an exercise in imaginative, sadomasochistic. What can we say? Humiliation. He's playing it out in his mind.
Yeah.
And doing this imaginative thing. Because it's distasteful to even, you don't want to go into it, but even like the content of it, it's him progressively putting his highest. He's thinking about his highest virtues or something like that, and putting it under her lowest. Right, he's constantly thinking about the highest thing, and then how can he put it lower? So that only leads in one direction if you keep doing it.
And he'd like to push it. I mean,
yes, he went right to the.
He was a completist,
right where you wouldn't want to go.
Completionist in that type of thing.
Yeah, and then it's also during that period as well that he's in that part of his path. Let's put it that way, where you go into the unconscious. The content of the unconscious is in the unconscious for a reason. And
that's an interesting phrase.
Yes, it's where all the things are that you find distasteful. That you couldn't imagine. Like it's dissuasive. But the confrontation with that content is unavoidable. And
so do you feel that this period, represents his kind of his working through the Cliffoth as a structured, or is it as a structured thing, or is it really just kind of like you said, overcoming the disgust reflex? More of a straightforward psychological thing.
There's a little bit of that in there. There's this naive gloss that's in there about the disgust reflex and that kind of a thing. And we've got to remember at the time, I mean, this is in the 20s. It's easy to forget that germ theory is not really understood that well. Other things, basic things that we take for granted. So he does this experiment with the Abbey, which is he keeps it in unsanitary conditions because it's supposed to be overcoming this disgust reflex. But that's not going to be helpful if you have a sick child. And people were constantly sick there. Constantly sick, but like the idea that it might be germs and that we should clean the place, it wasn't commonly accepted.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really understood. I think in that period, those a couple of years, like 1920 to 22, something like that, he's gone right down to the bottom of his unconscious, and he's scraping the bottom, so to speak.
So have you come to any personal feelings or conclusions on that? Do you really think that it was I even gave it to AI and asked AI at length, and it said it probably didn't happen, but that's AI.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't ask AI anything. I mean, it was, let's just say AI gave advice to my publisher, and 5 different ones, and the outcome wasn't as advised, as predicted. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Yes, I don't think... I don't think anything that's described in that passage happened in any way, shape, or form. I find it again. It's like it's weird. You find earlier on where he's talking about his daughter being sick, and remember, this is a diary that no one's going to read. It's just for him, right? It's just for him, and he writes in there about how much he loves his daughter, and he can't wait to get this medicine for her because she's sick. And it's like a one of those rare touching moments where you read something by Crowley where he's just being a he displays some element of just being like a regular person.
My other, I know it's like few and far between, but the other one that I think of, or that I immediately thought of when you pointed that out, was Rosamundi, where he did the poem after breaking with Rose Kelly and their daughter dies. And he's saying, my head hits Rose, my head hits the floor. That one I think about a lot. That's a really good one.
Yeah, he's very clearly devastated by the death of his daughter at that time. Like it's when the child in question that we're talking about dies, you again, it's that you see how devastated he is by losing a child. And even for someone who, let's say, didn't live up to his didn't live up to the traditional expectations of a father.
Yeah, was he involved in the slightest with any of his kids' lives? Really?
Not really. He did. When he managed to get himself an heir. When after he finished the work with the book and then had his first non-magical partner who he had a child with. Mm-hmm. I think maybe he saw the child once when the child was 10, and he was an old man.
Was that Aleister Crowley?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Who had his own problems, probably as a that from his own upbringing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Which we can blame Crowley in terms of his absence. Perhaps.
Yes.
But, yeah.
Well, we should just go straight to the kind of gnosis, right? In terms of
why not?
Why not?
Yes.
In terms of, because I mean, the argument you're making, which is the argument of a practitioner, and is basically that he was actually doing something, and that if the positive and negative biographies of him are both missing the point, and so the core thread, I think there were several core threads here, but how would you see the core thread that you pulled out? How would you describe it from his work and life?
He, who and what he is, it starts from the beginning. It's there from the very beginning. There's his father dies. He has his first conscious thought, and it's this conjunction of opposites between wanting wanting direct spiritual experience, right? But also at the same time rebelling against the notion of, that particular notion of God that he'd inherited from his evangelical parents. So it's this weird move in two directions, and it continues through his life as a young man, where he's trying to find authentic Christianity. He's trying to find the real deal, and at the same time, he's trying to be diabolical, like break every rule that there is. And these two things develop with each other in commensurate fashion, right? So the more profound it gets in terms of spiritual realization, the more he's more, visibly rejecting we can say evangelical, but there's also a mixture in there of his what can we say, upper middle class English upbringing as well. So there's a polite society, we might put it that way, of the of the 19th century, early 20th century. So by the time he gets to Cambridge, he decides the way he's going to have genuine spiritual experiences by evoking the devil. And he gets Arthur Edward Waite's book of Black Magick and of Pacts. He reads that. He gets really disappointed because all he finds are these. He finds not magicians who are railing against a tyrannical idea of God, but just naughty Christians. Right, people
That's hilarious.
Yeah, people who practice black magic, they're just really being naughty Christians.
Right.
And so he found that very disappointing.
Still true today.
Yes, and it's a disappointment he had with black magic his entire life. He found it revolting, repulsive, just the very idea of it. But Arthur Edward
Mostly
Waite,
because it was it's so low level and kind of distastefully enmeshed in the physical world.
Yeah, and there's nothing there about, Crowley wanted to seize the spiritual origins of the world. He wanted direct contact with it, realization, right? That's what he's after. And in that book, there's mention of a secret church, of a real church by Arthur Edward Waite. He writes to him, Waite tells him to read a particular book that's at the tail end of the theosophical movement in medieval Europe, not Blavatsky, the other theosophical movement, Burma, Jacob Burma, and people of that school of thought. And it's a book by Eckhart Schausen, The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. Right. A book written by an accomplished mystic, right? Who he's an authentic initiate, right?
Okay.
Unlike Waite, right?
And you mean that in the historical sense as well, as in he was some type of continental Rosicrucian or something like that?
No, I just mean it as in direct spiritual experience, because this is the key thing that we're getting to, which is this secret church that's described in this book, Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. The secret church is synonymous with spiritual experience. If you have spiritual realization, that's the same thing as membership to this secret church. Members can recognize each other, right? But there are no secret meetings where they get together and put robes on and have secret handshakes and whatever.
Alas.
Yeah. And the spiritual realization is not just some kind of like passive, nebulous, mystical state that you experience. It is alive itself. It's like a living wisdom or divine wisdom that acts in the world, and it goes where it's going to go, and it starts traditions and schools and things like that. And it's not confined to any particular expression or human institution that might be created in order to bring people to that realization. And there is this rule, which is as soon as an institution of that nature becomes political, that spirit leaves. Right, the real thing actually leaves. So it's a very particular understanding, right, of this secret church, or this thread or lineage that runs throughout the world, and in the West, it's coming through Europe, right? And there's a name for this school as well, which is described in that book, which is the School of Prophets. An interesting note that no one seemed to notice, that this is the thing that Crowley then says, I want to join that lineage. I want to join that school of prophets, right?
Right.
Given what happens to him not long after.
Well, I guess mission accepted.
Yes. So he prays. He turns inward and he prays for to be made a fit candidate to join that secret church. That's what he asked for more than anything. And almost immediately, he meets members of the Golden Dawn, Julian Baker, and so on. He gets training in magic from the best magician in the Golden Dawn, Alan Bennett. He learns how to do astral travel, which he's a natural at. He does all of this in the space of a year, and he's doing this stuff, like he's working with material that's part of the Golden Dawn curriculum that he shouldn't be working with yet because he's not gone through the formal initiations to get to the requisite grades for these things, right? Mm. And he also gets given the book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, right? Just freshly translated by MacGregor Mathers, the head of the order, right, from French. And this, so right from the get-go, right? So he's asked to join the secret church. He immediately gets training in magic by authentic magicians outside of the formal structure of the Golden Dawn. And the first thing he gets is this book, Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. Now, what's important about that is that, for those that don't know, that medieval grimoire is, it instructs the practitioner to pray a lot until God sends you an angel, and then the angel will help you to control demons to do magical stuff, right? In a nutshell. But there's an introduction written by Mathers. And the introduction is, it presents an idea of magic that's not in the medieval grimoire. And the idea of magic is you need to unite yourself, identify with a god or a supreme god, something like that, and then you can command lower spirits. Yes. Right, and this is how they did it in ancient Egypt. And that idea, which was also shared by Westcott, one of the co-founder with Mathers of the Golden Dawn, that idea is Crowley's first idea of magic, real practical magic. This is the formula. This is what you do. And he calls it Abramelin, right? But it's that formula. It's that approach, right? Strictly speaking, it's not Abramelin. You know, what's in the actual medieval grimoire. Right. So this is all in the space of a year, and then he decides he's going to do this Abramelin working. They're like, you're not ready yet. You shouldn't do it yet. So immediately he buys a house because he's got the funds, and he's going to do the Abramelin working according to the grimoire. You know, like he's going to get the room with the sand in it and whatever. As soon as he decides to do that, something really interesting happens. There's a political drama in the Golden Dawn, and Crowley leaves to go and help Mathers. And whilst he does that, he goes to and he picks up the Lesser Key of Solomon the King, another medieval grimoire, right? And something else that's very important, which is a short spell, right, called the Preliminary Invocation. He goes to Mathers, and or rather, he goes to the temple, the Golden Dawn Temple in London, and he comes back with this material, right? So there's a lot of moving parts, so let me just try and make this as simple as possible, right? Mm-hmm. He makes the call to join the church. He gets training immediately outside of the formal structure of the Golden Dawn,
and that was as if by coincidence,
right? Okay. He also then decides he's going to unite himself or identify with this supreme god or angel or something like that, right? With the Abramelin gloss. He then goes and gets 2 magical texts immediately, right? Through coincidence, you know, like through events, just a turn of events, right? So he goes to get he gets the Lesser Key of Solomon the King, the Goetia as it's sometimes called, and this Preliminary Invocation. And then bizarrely, I mean, later on, he will publish the text.
Right.
And he has this, it's like it's medieval grimoire, right? That seems to be Jewish, right? It's Solomon the King's magic, after all, right? And then weirdly, there's this Preliminary Invocation just slapped there at the beginning. And it's like, why are these 2 things published together makes no sense. right? It makes sense because this is what Mathers taught Crowley. This is what you do with magic. You unite with the supreme god first, then you can command demons, right? That's why he publishes it in that way.
And do you think that Crowley took that injunction to unite yourself with the supreme god as also in a way indicative of the entire spiritual path, including yoga and seeking samadhi and all of that?
Yes, because both Westcott and Mathers, and Westcott actually describes this. He says that the action of uniting with a god sounds exactly like Indian yoga.
Yes,
this is in the material Crowley's reading when he first joins. Right, so he doesn't get that idea out of nowhere. You know, this combination of yoga and the invocation of the angel being essential to his system.
Okay,
this is what he learns. This it's like, oh, union with God. That's the that's the main thing you're supposed to do. Now, okay, so he's gone and got this material, and then so Crowley's invocation of his holy guardian angel. Right. To do this, he uses this preliminary invocation. That's the only thing he ever uses is this preliminary invocation, nothing else. He's not using that Bromelian grimoire, right? It's just this spell. And it's important to note as well that there's some mistranslation going on. So he doesn't know all of the details with this spell. And it's a spell that he uses before he does any magical working, because that's what you do, don't you? You unite with the supreme god first, even if only symbolically, you know, and then you do your working. And then he messes about and does some yoga here and there, like preliminary stuff with Alan Bennett. He goes to he goes to Asia to train with him and that kind of thing. Has some preliminary results. Then he gets married and goes traveling. And then so he's showing off to his... Now, at this point, it's like he's mastered practical magic. He's got enough out of yoga. And he's going to show off to his wife. Right, but he's using the same spell that he's always used for the angel.
If I can rewind a bit, If I can rewind a bit, just so I make sure I understand. So does that mean that when he was doing his Abramelin at Boleskine, he was doing that by doing the Bornless one over and over?
He didn't even begin the operation in that manner. Right, he got the house, he set some stuff up, he messed about with Goetia. There was some messing about with that. It was riddled through the Golden Dawn. I mean, Mathers arguably lost his mind because of messing about with demons.
Standard occult order nonsense. Yeah.
There's this wonderful story of Alan Bennett. You know, he tells Mathers about this Shiva mantra that if you repeat it over and over, it's supposed to lead to the destruction of the universe. And so he closes his eyes and just starts repeating it. And Mathers pulls out a revolver and aims it at his head and tells him he needs to stop or he's going to shoot him. And from Mathers' perspective, there's a whole demon drama going on.
Oh,
something
boy.
to do with
He
demons.
must have been a piece of work. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Right. So then he finds himself in Egypt, and then he does this working, and then lo and behold, his wife Rose, she has messages for him. Now I'm just going to pause there, right, just to try and make this as simple as possible. The material that Crowley was working with came from people who were just raiding like the British Library for whatever fragments they could find of magical stuff, right? And then making it into a workable system, right? It's like chaos magic. They were getting stuff and then making stuff that works, like just doing it right. Some of it was mistranslated as well, right? But what we see is this. Crowley has to join something very specific, a very specific lineage, right? He gets this rapid training. He then gets his hands on this material of a very specific idea about magic. And then he gets this spell, right? Then he ends up, he has some preliminary instruction in concentration, that kind of a thing, to experience a mystical state, whatever. And then he's in Egypt, right? And he's using this spell. Now, I'll just throw this in here at this moment, right? So they didn't know any of this at the time, and I can go more into the weeds, which I won't do because it'll probably be tedious. But you can read some of the detective work in the notes in the essay for anyone that's interested, because there's something interesting about where Mathers gets this idea from about what Egyptian magic is. But just taking the spell and the Goetia. Right now, traditionalists or people who are into grimoire magic, they will say, you know, it's only a section of the Less Key of Solomon. this spell doesn't really belong there. Actually, it's an exorcism. Like, why would you put them together? It's poorly done, whatever. Well, what we do know now is that the Lesser Key of Solomon isn't Jewish at all. It's actually Greek. It goes back to you can trace it, through Europe, Byzantium, all the way back to Alexandria, right? Like 1,800 years ago, to this material that's called the Greek magical papyri. It belongs to that tradition, the circle, the triangle, right? You can trace it all the way back there. And then guess where the spell comes from that he was using?
Right.
Yeah, it comes from the Greek
found
magical
their way back to each other.
Papyri, yes. And lo and behold, in that material, it's more explicit than it is in later grimoire stuff. But what do you do when you do magic? You identify with the god. Well, you have to make sure you're using the right name, and that means a number of names from different traditions. But it also involves identifying yourself as a particular god in a hierarchy to command the spirits to do things for you, right? So it's the same tradition. How did these things come together in such a way that Crowley could in rapid succession, right? He gets the training, he gets the material, ends up in Egypt, right? And he's asked to join the School of Prophets. Now, he does this magic in Egypt, and as you would expect as part of this tradition, there's an oracle, his wife, right, who starts to give him these messages. Says the gods are waiting for you. Now, something important happens here, which I think isn't very well appreciated, because you get these things about Crowley. People say things about Crowley that are just ludicrous. There's so much of it that's just ludicrous. This idea that so famously, what happens with Crowley now is, he gets these messages through his wife Rose, and he's instructed to go into a room and he writes a book, 1 chapter per day for 3 days, and this becomes the Book of the Law. And the Book of the Law proclaims him to be a prophet of the law of Telema, right? And it's the end of an age and the beginning of a new one, right? And this is what he says happens to him. He's in the room, and there's an angel, and the angel dictates the book, and he's in the room alone, right? Now there are these stories, like, or rather, what the right way of putting it is this: there is a desire to do this, right? There is a desire to say, no, Crowley's the content of this book just comes out of his perverted subconscious, right? That he's made it all up. That any role that Rose played in it, right? He downplays it, and he always does this with women. Like he downplays women and whatever. It's the complete opposite. Time and time again, it's the complete opposite when it comes to the book. He can't get enough of shirking his responsibility to the book and giving credit to the women that he's working with. He does it over and over and over again. Right? And arguably, they don't deserve it. The amount of credit he gives them. It's like, when he writes, I don't want to digress too much. When he's writing book 4, he dictates the content, and the person he's working with, she writes it down. Would you give her authorship of the book, co-authorship of the book?
Legally, definitely not.
But he's like, no, this is her work. This is her work, odd. And it's not really. Yes, but we'll come back to why that would be the case, right? And then there's things like this. Oh, actually, no. It was a real magical working, but Rose was in the room, and she's the one speaking, and he's writing down, and he's written her out of the scene.
Well, when he was taking, as he said, dictation from
so when he's receiving the Book of the Law,
reading,
sometimes
does that mean she's trance channeling, or what's happening there?
Yeah. So she goes into trance and she's relaying these messages. You might then think, well, when he's taking dictation for this book, it's still her speaking, doing the dictation. She's dictating it, he's writing it down.
Right.
and that he's written her out of it. Like, oh no, she wasn't really there. There was an angel, and I was hearing the angel and writing it down. Right. But the nature of what happened to him, right, for those 3 days, is underappreciated, right? And get it the wrong way around. And it's this, and there's a reason why people have this desire to do this, by the way, and I'll come to it in a second. But this is what happened to him. He's mastered practical magic. He can summon demons and angels and illuminate the Great Pyramid. Summon sylphs, do all this stuff, right? He can do concentration practice and experience dhyana and whatever, right? He can do all of this stuff, and he's kind of bored by it. He knows what works and what doesn't. He's the expert practical magician, right? When he's there in Egypt, he has no idea why the gods now want to speak to him or why they're speaking through Rose. Rose has zero experience in any of this stuff, right? She tells him what he needs to do, how the ritual is supposed to be. He thinks it won't work. It can't. Well, the ritual won't work the way she's describing it, right? So he decides I'll just do it.
Magic, that one.
It's like I'll do it just to show that it's not going to work. It can't work. How can this work? Everything that he takes to be part of his identity is smashed to smithereens. Right? The idea of him being the practical magician is turned on its head. Here's this ordinary woman telling him what will work, right? He tries to do ordinary stuff, the stuff that he's learned, none of it works. Tries to do tarot stuff and other rituals, none of it works. The stuff that she gives him that shouldn't work, works. She's telling him what he needs to do. He then, when he's writing the book itself, he's constantly fighting with the where the dictation is coming from. And it's commented on as he's writing it down. At this point, he's like a rational Buddhist kind of guy. He'd even taken refuge as a Buddhist.
Interesting.
In 1903, I think it was. He taken
with
refuge.
Alan Bennett or somewhere else?
No, I think it was after he'd been with Alan Bennett. But as Tobias Churton puts it, he decides to improve himself. He writes some letters about like how, crappy his behavior's been and whatever, right? He's going to try and be, yes. So just right at the peak of his rationality, his Buddhism, his desire to, be a better person, right? And he's also this expert practical magician. Everything, by the way, if you put all of that together, that's like it's like an ideal, isn't it? That a lot of occultists or magicians or whatever embody.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's like the standard like IT guy, Buddhist kind of. Absolutely.
Right. Yes.
Absolutely.
So the idea that everything that you think you know about practical magic, right, is not even real magic at all. Right. That's not going to go down very well with practical magicians. Right. It's that very thing in Crowley that's being smashed to pieces with the book. Right. So, of course, you're not going to accept that Rose, who doesn't know anything about magic, right? She's the one dictating how the working's going to go. She's the one leading the working. She's the one, like, it's her messages. It's her who's responsible for it. You could put it that way. Right. So, and then when it comes to the reception of the book, he, like I mentioned, he's wrestling with this text, and it's like he's having an argument. He's being overcome by something he doesn't want to be overcome by. Now, this is important to say this. He said yes to this, but nevertheless, there's still this
and this
opposition.
This is the part where the book is like, I see they hate the pen and the hand that write it and all of that. Yeah.
Yes. One other detail, which is important, of course, which is whilst he's in this negotiating phase and he's skeptical of these messages that he's getting, and he's like, this can't possibly work, and so on. He stipulates. He makes a deal. He stipulates a condition. It's like, okay, I'll do this working. I'll do this thing that that you're asking me to do, right? But it's in your own interest that I experience samadhi. So he says this to the gods. That's speaking through Rose. I want to experience samadhi. Samadhi is union with God. We can just use that as a basic way of understanding it. It's what would come after dhyana if you continued with yoga in the system that Crowley was working in. Another way of thinking about it is mystical death. You could think of it that way. But this is what he says. And he says it a couple of times, not just once. He says it a couple of times. Anyways, he's writing this text. And in the text, the text tells him what's going to happen, right? And what it will mean when it does happen. Then it happens in the middle, right in the middle of the book. He experiences samadhi. There's 13 lines that he's not conscious of writing. The 13th one being him coming back around and saying, in his own paraphrase, like, "Where am I? And what's going on?" And then there's a load of prophecies about what will happen to him and what he needs to do. And this book, the reception of the book in this fashion, right? It's destroyed his rationalism. It's destroyed his Buddhism, right? Everything that he thinks he knows about the world has been turned upside down. The image of himself as the master magician, well, he's just been mastered by his wife, by messages coming through his wife. She doesn't even know anything about magic. There's this incredible antagonism between the content of the book and his conscious mind. Right. Now, it takes him 20 years to reconcile himself with the content of that book. But it's precisely then when he's achieved a state of consciousness that's the same as the origin of the book.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. It's interesting. I was just thinking, just when you were saying conscious, it's interesting that he was on a Buddhist, I'm trying to be good kick.
Yeah.
Because Israel Regardie probably would take that as, well, the content of the third book of the law is just Crowley's naughty side coming out and saying, I will not be stifled. It's the return of the repressed, forcefully, the contents of the unconscious forcefully erupting into the conscious that has held them back for the good of society so far.
Yes. Well, there's things that could be said about Regardie. That's, do we want to say that now, or shall I? I'll continue with the story, and maybe
Sure,
we'll come back round to it.
Okay. Well, now people are going to want to know for sure.
Yeah.
Now that you've mentioned it,
so he's received this book. He experiences samadhi right in the middle of it. The content of the book is repulsive to him. The style, the content, all of it, and it's the complete opposite to this image he had of himself that's now just been obliterated by his ordinary wife saying things to him, that's like teaching him what real magic is. Like he doesn't know what the real thing is. He's just come into contact with it. He then represses the implications and the experience that he's had for about 20 years. There's still some stuff that he's not very, very, comfortable with even towards the end of his life. He then, so as an example, 2 years later, right, there's a process that's been set in motion as a result of this samadhi. And it forces the issue. So 2 years later, he then decides he's going to do the Abramelin working. I want to do the Abramelin working, right? And so he goes back to that preliminary invocation again. That's what he uses. And the story goes that he does it in his mind, in his astral temple, whilst riding a donkey across China. And then he experiences samadhi at the end, and he's like, oh, look, I finally achieved samadhi. Except he experiences it 2 years before. Not only does he experience 2 years before, but it's documented. Now, does he admit to this? Like, is there anything where he might have written somewhere that he admits to it? He writes a couple of commentaries over the course of his life for the Book of the Law. He refers to what happened to him as a trance a couple of times. It's only in the comment D, though, which is like his inspired attempt at a commentary, that he still won't call it samadhi, but he says, this is the bargain that I made. I asked precisely for this, and then the gods gave it me. Right? He's repressed it. Why would he repress it? Then, so let's say he's done his invocation on his donkey, right? And he's done the Abramelin working for the first time, apparently, and he experiences samadhi. You think that, okay, now he's crossed the abyss, hasn't he? He's crossed the abyss and he's had union with his angel. This is it, right? He's done it, hasn't he? And in fact, at the beginning of that working, he has a vision where he's told he's crossed the abyss in Kobe in Japan. That's not good enough. He then does it again. John St. John is another example, right? Crossing the abyss again. Still not good enough. His superior in the order, George Cecil Jones, says he's a master of the temple and that he's crossed the abyss. Right? Still not good enough. He then, so the years are going by here, right? Then he does the Enochian working, where he scries the Enochian ethers to cross the abyss again.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? He is constantly dragging his heels and not recognizing or honoring the responsibility that he has. Right? He's constantly doing that. So again, there's this idea of Crowley being this guy who's quick to boast and claim spiritual attainments and whatever. Mm. On the contrary, it's like, how many times does he have to be told? When it comes to his responsibilities to the Book of the Law, he writes up. So what he's supposed to do, according to the instructions, is he's published the Book of the Law and explain how he arrived at the book. Right. So he tries to do this the first time with the Equinox, is a biannual journal kind of thing that he publishes. I think beginning in, is it 1910 or 11, something like that, somewhere around there. He starts publishing it, and there's this serial that he has in there that's called the Temple of Solomon the King, right? And it's supposed to be this story. So what does he do? Right, he publishes all of the Golden Dawn material. Mm-hmm. Right. It becomes this bloated technical thing that's all over the place. He has someone else write some of his story for him. And then eventually it culminates in him publishing a version of the Book of the Law that doesn't follow the instructions precisely that's in the text, right? It's just a mess. And then the gods come back to speak to another oracle and they say, can you do it properly this time? You need to do it properly. You need to publish the book and explain how you got there, right? Which is going to be book 4. Book 4, he writes in 4 parts. The first one, he does write one on meditation that's pretty good. It's okay, right? It's okay. When he gets to the section on magic, he just describes temple furniture.
Right. To many people's chagrin.
Right. Yeah. Then he writes a third installment, Magic in Theory and Practice.
Which is it's impossible to
it's also bloated and technical and impenetrable and whatever,
and full of comments on the bloody sacrifice and all of that that are veiled. So,
and then eventually in the 1930s, in the late 1930s, he gets around to doing part 4, which is the Equinox of the Gods, which is where he publishes the Book of the Law and the way it's supposed to have been published in the first place, right? But you can, it's in that trajectory that the gods come to speak to an oracle, a scarlet woman, right? He uses that terminology for that function. He's always giving them the credit. He'll dictate it to them. Why is he dictating it? Why doesn't he just sit down and write it? And you notice in his career, he struggles to do any justice to the book, anything to do with the book. Eventually, he publishes it. And after that, he's then able to write things in a most masterful way, like 8 lectures on yoga, little essays toward truth, the Book of Thoth, the Book of Wisdom or Folly. Incredible works. Now, okay, so having said all of that, why repress it? Right? Mm-hmm. Why struggle with it? Why drag your heels? Why be slow to take up the responsibility? Because he'd said yes, he'd stipulated a condition to do this work. He'd said yes to it. And he then gets the book, the content of the book, and it tells him what he has to do, who he is, right? And it's dressed in the most repulsive way you could think of, right? And he's supposed to champion this text.
Right.
And this is the message he's told. Everyone will betray you. The entire world will hate you. You look like you're fallen, right? Secretly, I'll lift you up, right? And what you need to do, and it says this in there, what you need to do is talk yourself up. You're not going to get through it. You won't get through it. You need to talk yourself up. it's this awful. He's got this awful text. He got what he asked for. His idea of being an expert practical magician is to be smashed to smithereens. He knows nothing.
Huh.
He knows nothing, and he's going in a direction he didn't. What can we say? He'd said yes to it, and he'd even asked for it as the most important thing in the world. But he hadn't. I don't think he'd expected what would be asked of him, what would be required.
Right.
And everything in that book comes true. Everything comes to pass. Right. It's there. Right. Now I'll just say at this point, so he says he wants to join this lineage, the School of Prophets. He gets this training. He gets this idea about what magic is. He gets the material. He goes to Egypt and he does the magic. It all goes back to the Greek magical papyri, or rather a tradition that existed then that had a very specific orientation. All of the spells, right, they're all to do with petitioning gods or deities to help you, right, as if you were in the underworld. You're in the underworld.
Okay.
You want to pass through various parts of the underworld, right? The most important part being what's called the second death, or where you're judged. And they're petitioning these underworld deities, these gods, to help them, right, do these things, right? Now, it turns out that idea that we're actually in the underworld already, right? Turns out that's a very old, ancient idea. This tradition of magic that I'm talking about, it's never just been someone being practical, who does a practical thing, gets a practical result. Because sometimes people look at that material and they like to divide it up and say, this thing here where you unite with a god, that's mysticism and shouldn't be in there, right? Back then, the division between a prophet, which meant someone who speaks on behalf of a god or a divine nature, a magician, a healer, these were all the same thing. A lawgiver, these were all the same thing. It was all the same function. Now, of course, it was distributed throughout societies, so everyone knew a spell or two or whatever, right? But of course, you have people who are an elite, like dedicate themselves to that, and they provide a very specific function. Crowley's book, the Book of the Law, right? The first thing that happens in the book is that he's identified with a dead priest, Ankaf Konsu,
yes,
who is on this tablet, this stele, right, that his wife led him to in this museum, right, before the working, to say it's these gods, right? This stele it's a funerary stele. There's the dead guy, right, with Rahal Kuit in the underworld being judged. There's 2 spells on the back, concerned with the second death and being judged. So he gets this book, right, dictated to him. By the way, he doesn't say there's an angel in the room. He says he hears a voice, and the angel is in his mind. It's got this image in his mind.
Where did you say that? Yeah, I reread you wrote that in the essay last night, and that is, of course, not people's common understanding of the event.
Yeah.
So where did you find that?
There'll be a direct reference in the notes, but he wherever he describes what happens, so in like the Equinox of the Gods in sort of biography.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But people misread it as he sees an angel in the room. One other note, I'll just say this, and this is thanks to Tobias Churton's detective work. We find 20 years later, after he's received the book, we find himself wandering in a diary whilst he's extremely ill and hallucinating, whether or not a lesion he had on his tongue at the time might have been responsible for some kind of blood poisoning or something like that, so that it aided in him hearing this voice. Right, he's wondering about that.
He was kind of in a fugue and couldn't tell what was his voice and what was not.
More
as much anymore. Like there was kind of like like when you're tripping or doing magic and you're asking yourself, like, is this actually happening, or am I just like making it real by dint of pure imagination and willpower?
Well, at the time he's hallucinating in a fever, so he's seeing things that aren't there.
Right, so it's not clear which one it is anymore. Yeah,
but he's wondering, is that the mechanism by which I would hear a voice that could have made that possible? I mean, as I talk about in the essay, it's not, what he describes isn't that far-fetched when it comes to practical magic. right? The only thing we need is perhaps a mechanism for why he would hear something that would sound like an audible physical voice, right? But as you just mentioned, just take some mushrooms or whatever.
Right.
Right.
Well, I had also heard that apparently, I mean, he was well into peyote at this time, and that was apparently also selling peyote, which was how they were funding this Egyptian trip. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But at least one person has said that he was there was peyote involved in this excursion.
I think when he was in Mexico, with the temple of what's it called?
The lamp of the inner light or something like that.
Yes, I think perhaps they were experimenting with stuff like that, but he didn't need funds to travel to Egypt. I mean, he was extraordinarily wealthy.
Okay. So this may be a spurious story then.
I mean, he was stinking rich. Like it's hard to appreciate how rich he was. I mean, he was extremely rich, and it took him a long time to burn through all that cash. Yeah. So anyway, at least on that front, I don't for a second think he was on any drugs or on anything during that working, doing the with the Book of the Law. I mean, here's the other thing about Crowley is this: all of the best criticisms against him come from him. Because he documented everything, every thought, every in excruciating detail in his diaries.
Right.
That he might be deluding himself, right? You could argue that in some cases, but he's never openly lying about anything. He doesn't cover anything up. In fact, there's a part of an element of his personality is that he wants to rub your face in it. If you're snooty about details that would be considered bad manners to talk about, or something like that, right? He's very it's very open, right?
Right.
Yes.
Endearingly so at times, and maybe not so much at others.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is this: the content of the Book of the Law. Coming back to that, he's identified with this dead priest immediately, right? And then who is he dealing with? These are underworld deities. Knew it's waiting for you on the other side of the second death. So what's supposed to happen in this underworld journey, right? In the Egyptian tradition, right, or in this Hellenized Egyptian tradition, this in Alexandria. The sun god goes into the underworld, illuminates it, wakes up the dead. The dead have a choice. They can follow the sun god, right? Or they can join with the forces that wish to extinguish the light that's in the underworld. And usually this force is presented as some kind of like big serpent or a beast or whatever, something like that, right? Apep or, there's different names depending on the text. That god, then the sun god, and there's different names depending on what he's doing, right? But what he then does is he becomes what's called the headless god, right? The headless god. By traveling into the underworld, he then resurrects the corpse of Osiris, and he's a headless god, but that's because he's got a new head, which is the sun itself. So it's like a human body with a sun for a head, or a star sometimes, right? And this is Re Osiris. And then continues to travel through the underworld, and then there's a battle. It takes place on the island of trampling, right? Stamping, trampling things down, these kinds of things. This is an Egyptian motif for defeating one's enemies. But there is a spiritual war between consciousness continuing, right, and the darkness that wants to put it out. Consciousness continuing is the same thing as the creation of a new world, right? And traveling in the underworld isn't really just the god at the end of a day and then traveling through the night and then coming out the other side. Mythologically, the world ends at night and then gets recreated again, right? So it's the end of a world and the beginning of another one. And then after passing through the second death, right, these souls can then go with the sun god as he rises in the east on a new day, and they rise as stars in the night sky. right? And they're immortalized. This is eternal life. It's the life that's promised to you by the divine. And again, part of this is identifying with Ray Osiris as part of this journey. An important detail is as he approaches sunrise, this is where he has his most harsh nature in terms of dealing with the judgment of the dead and his enemies who have tried to stop creation from happening again. Right. So Nuit is this goddess. She's the goddess that's waiting for you at the end. That's the promise if you survive the second death. There is with the judgment, right? You get separated from your human self, who and what you really are gets separated from it. Like it gets judged and you get separate, and it gets separated. Does the soul continue, right, or does it stay with the image that's being judged? And Horus
the answer is it depends.
The choice is yours.
Okay.
So the god has illuminated the underworld, showed you where you are, showed you what the choice is, but the choice is yours, right? You could choose to go in either direction. And then, so there's a god Horus in the second chapter of the Book of the Law, Horus of Bedet, called Hadit, right, in the book. But this is one version of Ray Osiris, or sometimes it's his son helping him in the battle. And then, of course, we've got Ray Harakiti, or Ra-Hoor-Khuit, who's in the third chapter of the Book of the Law. Here he is doing his judgment, right, and defeating the enemies of consciousness and light and so on, so that creation could continue. And as you would expect in terms of an underworld journey, the Book of the Law, when you read it, starts off really nice and pleasant, ends up really awful, right? Very harsh, right? This is the sun in its most vicious aspect, right? It has the structure of an underworld journey. Right in the middle, we have the second death, and it's repeatedly spelled out what the nature of death is. You can stay with the image that's been judged and that's going to die, right, with the old world. Reason and compassion is often used, right, as a means to get you to do that, right? As in, there's no such thing as the divine. What about that? Shouldn't you have compassion for this which is passing away? Shouldn't you have compassion for it, right? No. If you want to continue, if you want to go further, right, you have to let go of all of that. You have to let go of it all. Of course, you can see this is speaking very precisely to what Crowley's position was when he received the Book of the Law as well. He was a rationalist and he was a Buddhist, right? Anyway, so yes. Do
you think that point right there, that he was a rationalist and a Buddhist, and as you mentioned in the essay as well, which was actually, trendy, right? It's like you don't really lose any social status if you're a Buddhist. I don't know about how it was then, but that's certainly the case now.
It was very much so then. It was very much the case then, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's like, do you think that is a big part of why he struggled with this for so long? It
is absolutely the case that everything that he built up, that he thought was the right thing to do, that he'd reasoned out, the whole thing, excuse me, it was all smashed to pieces. And now you need to go and tell everyone that you're a prophet and a new age has started. And by the way, it's going to be veiled. No one's going to understand it, including you. It says this very clearly. You will not understand the mysteries in this book. Don't even try. He tries, of course. And then what happens? What the book says will happen. You fall from it if you try and do that. The one case of someone who's there's this prophecy about someone who will follow Crowley, right? There was a candidate. Right. There was a candidate for that, Charles Stansfeld Jones.
Right.
They tried very hard to make him into, to fulfill that prophecy. And what happens? Jones goes crazy, loses his mind. It's sad, but it's very well documented in his letters. Anyway, so the content of the Book of the Law, what is it? Well, this is again, Crowley didn't know any of this. He didn't know any of these details. He was told he wouldn't know these details. But what do we get? We get someone acquiring materials to belong to a tradition, right? That then flowers in Egypt, of all places. The content of it, what is it? It's an underworld journey. It's underworld magic. It's the tradition that he's been practicing. It's the thing he gets from the very beginning. right? This ancient idea that you identify with a god, right? And here's there's so much to say here, which is, so in 1906, when he decides, you know what, I'm gonna achieve samadhi on my own terms, and he's pretending that the Book of the Law hasn't happened. He formulates his teaching as invoking the Holy Guardian Angel, acquiring the knowledge and conversation, right, the Holy Guardian Angel. How do you do it? You invoke often. And he uses these phrases, and it's like, where are these phrases coming from? Algoides, that's what he uses to describe the Holy Guardian Angel. It's a convoluted story, right, but the detective works in the essay. It all goes back to a text called the Chaldean Oracles. At the time, they thought the Chaldean Oracles was just a mishmash of different proverbs and sayings or whatever from the ancient world, all just collected together. What we now know is that actually it was one text, and it goes back almost 2,000 years to a guy called Julian the Theurgist and Julian the Chaldean. They were a combo, father and son combo. And it was a text spoken from a different state of mind, right? A prophetic work at the end of an age and the beginning of another one. Part of the same tradition that I've been talking about, right? Crowley's just done the same thing.
Wait, so the Chaldean Oracles is saying there's basically a new aeon starting?
It was at the end of an age and the beginning of another one. So it's not necessarily that the text is saying this is the new age and whatever, but it was the end of an age and the beginning of another one. Like it was.
I see. And so what ages, when you say that, do you mean historically or?
Either way you dice it, really. If you take, say, Crowley's model of the aeons, right, 2,000 years ago, it was 2,000 years ago.
Okay.
But another way of looking at it, we could just say culturally. So the pagan world was dead. It was dying and it was dead. It's the beginning of Christianity, right? It's fading away. All the oracles have stopped speaking. They even say they were going to stop speaking. It's all going to disappear and go away. All the temples have been smashed, right? It's all dying. The ancient world is going. That decline continues for a number of centuries, as decline does. And it's only a couple of generations, and you get Porphyry, the Neoplatonist, so-called Neoplatonist, looking back to Julian the Theurgist, and that work, recognizing that the culture is completely exhausted. This intellectual culture has been completely exhausted, right? There's nothing real going on. We have to go back to the original stuff. And he's looking back. And this is the practice of theurgy, which Iamblichus brings in, which is a student. He brings it into Neoplatonism to get, the real stuff. Like, we need to get real magic back. We need to get real mystical experience back. Again, they're looking, but it comes from the Julians. Theurgy, that's where it comes from. So yes, there's this end of a world and beginning of another one. And for people who aren't familiar, I mean, the end of the pagan world, I mean, just even using that term demonstrates, the change that happened. But it was brutal. It was brutal what the Christians did, to the pagans, so-called pagans.
What specifically?
The destruction of the temples, the destruction of the literature. I think we have, maybe 3% of classical literature survived.
3%.
It's something like that. Yeah. There's a great book called The Darkening of the Age by someone called Nixie. I forget her first name. Apologies. Okay. But everything's documented in the, in the references in the essay there. But yes, it was pretty bad. It was a thorough expunging of a world, the beginning of another one. As it always, that's the pattern. So,
and you're talking about the entire period of collapse, not just like the Library of Alexandria, but the entire collapse period reduced it to like 3%.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Yeah. Yes, we know vanishingly little about the ancient world. We think we know everything about it, don't we? Because we've got a bit of Homer.
Well, I was thinking, it's like, what if we just got like the really bad ones? It's like Homer was the equivalent of the Jerky Boys or something like that.
Yeah, well, so some of the stuff we know about, like the magic and stuff like that from the ancient world, is like stuff that was found in a rubbish dump. It's like, is this the stuff that people thought was crap?
Well,
And
but it's funny because it always seems to happen that way, and that resonates with your the teaching will be veiled in filth comment. It's like, but that was the same with Dee's diaries out in the field. They dug them up out of a hole in the ground, I'm sure that I think there's other examples I'm forgetting. So that's you always find the good stuff where everyone else is too disgusted to look.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, the Greek magical papyri was the work of one collector who collected it all together, which is nice in Thebes. Yes, so what we find is this extraordinary coherence in Crowley's story. On the surface, it looks like a complete mess. Fragments here and there from different traditions mashed together, having these experiences he doesn't really understand. He's trying to interpret them as best he can. He received the book of the law. Then in 1906, he's like, "What have I am who the book says I am, but what have I come to teach people?" Well, apparently not Thelema. No, he's going to teach people the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. Like, what's going on? But there's this extraordinary, he doesn't know, and he cannot know, and the scholarship isn't there at the time. There's this extraordinary coherence, right? There's a reality moving under the surface, and it's demonstrated in his life. It is as the book says. Like, you will look like you are fallen. You won't understand everything in the text, but secretly you'll be lifted up.
Interesting. So it's like there's maybe 2 or 3 threads in the essay in terms of that destiny. There's him wanting to join the school of prophets.
Yep.
There's him wanting to go over to the side of the devil.
Yep.
And then there's this general idea of spiritual attainment being the passageway into the cloud in the sanctuary.
Yep. But they're all the same thing, those 3.
So tell us how you reconcile all those.
I mean, the path. One thing to understand about the path is that it's a conjunction of opposites. It's a conjunction of opposites. So you encounter an appearance of a particular type, right? You will. People often just get stuck there. They'll stop with the appearance, whatever it might be.
Okay.
But there's a reality behind that appearance. You'll travel from one to the other, right? And then you'll discover that if you continue traveling, you don't get stuck with what you now think is reality. You'll discover the thing that you traveled through in the first place, right? Also in the heart of that reality, and that there's a relationship between these two. It's like a consummation. They're both, one is found through the other. They remain separate from each other, right? Because you can't have love if things don't remain separate. And therefore they're part of a mystery. And there's contact with that mystery. That's what we would then call awakening or realization or something else. A fruit from a particular practice. Sometimes it's not realization. Sometimes it's something else that you might be pursuing, but this is how creation unfolds itself. It's a movement between opposites, a conjunction of opposites. So you see this, for instance, this talk about crossing the abyss, what Crowley means by this. You will do a practice where you will experience, let's say, union with the angel. You experience a mystical state. There's bliss, there's lights, there's visions. It's all great, right? It feels wonderful. Then what happens is, it's like everything that you've just experienced goes away. It disappears, and life gets drier and drier and more challenging, and maybe dark things start to come up. Unpleasant emotional and mental states, so on and so forth. Sometimes unpleasant energetics, that kind of a thing. And it will be, an encounter with an existential, what I would call an existential shadow, before you then come into contact with the mystery, something beyond both of those opposites, right? It contains both, but it's beyond both. And you have to travel through both, right, to get to that mystery. And then the cycle repeats itself, but now the opposites are of a more profound and therefore, with the dark part, more challenging nature.
That's like a spiral, which is very, very Chaldean oracles. Yeah.
Yes. And people can stop at various different points. Sometimes they want to hold on to the light part, the bit that they think is good. They want to hold on to it. Sometimes they just want to wrestle with that darkness. They think it's a problem that has to be solved and they need to wrestle with it. So you can get people who stop at different points on the path, that kind of a thing. The essential orientation, or the wise orientation, is to recognize that you're none of the things that you encounter. Instead, you're the thing that goes. Right. And now we're approaching Now we're approaching Crowley's wisdom. What Crowley actually taught.
And by go, you mean that goes forward, not that falls away?
Yes, the movement.
Okay.
Yes, the movement through these opposites. You're not any of the things you take yourself to be, always fall in one of these categories, right? Or you can dice it up that way. And which is why the path is one of you encountering larger and larger or more profound identities to do with yourself, right? But at a certain point, you have to recommend, or rather, if you have a good teacher, you'll recommend that you're not any of these things, any of these stops along the way, if you like. You're the thing that's going. And therefore, if you want to describe the thing that's going, right, you're going to end up in silence, right? But you recognize that there is a going.
That was very beautifully put, Alan.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
So the God that goes. Yeah.
And when you're talking about those larger senses of self or identities, is that you would relate the grades to that?
Oh yeah, yeah. The grades
That's a beautiful description of it. I thought that really kind of ties a lot together.
Yeah.
Experientially, how that works experientially. That's a very good model of it.
Yeah. Nice. So this is what do what thou wilt means. This is what this is why Crowley favored Taoism. This is why he was such a big fan of Taoism. This recognition of going, that's the most important aspect of being on the path. Otherwise, you get stuck. Now, he articulates what I've just articulated in various different ways, but in a very mature way later on in his spiritual career. How does he do that? He does that because he has contact with what he's describing. Right, he's not making it up. He's not read it in a book somewhere. He's talking about. And this is, by the way, this is another thing about Crowley. He's for his entire career, he never just blindly accepts what someone tells him about a tradition or the nature of reality, right, or from a tradition or whatever, something like that. Even with Alan Bennett, he has a fundamental disagreement with him about the nature of reality or the Dharma.
What was their disagreement?
The disagreement was about how for samadhi to happen, right? Or rather, how can we put this? So Bennett had this idea about the likelihood of experiencing enlightenment or liberation in a life, right? And he talked about it in terms of it being extraordinarily unlikely, right? And he uses this image of a wheel going along the ground, and that it has to, land on a stone in a particular way. One part of the wheel has to land on the radius of the wheel, has to land on a stone on the floor, right, perfectly. And the chances of that happening, in terms of your incarnation, are very slim. So there's this kind of mechanistic or chance element to the Dharma that he's also very dour, is Alan Bennett.
Yes,
very serious and
classic.
And Crowley didn't see it that way. He found that to be problematic.
Crowley was fairly aspirational.
Yes,
attributing things to luck. I can imagine that just being intolerably Eastern and defeatist to him.
Well, in Magick Without Tears, so this is like his mature view of things. He has a couple of letters in there where he talks about how everything is chance. Absolutely everything is chance, right? But then, right, what do we then say about prophecy? What does that then mean about prophecy, right? It's almost like elevating the nature of prophecy, to if everything is random, then prophecy is the only real reality that there is, right? And tying that with, and he doesn't, how can I say? He probably doesn't put it as clearly as what I'm going to put it now, but it's faith. Crowley's entire career is about faith. He's an extremely religious man. Like in the most generous sense. Like he has faith in the divine. He wants to do the work of the divine. Whenever the gods come along to speak to him through an oracle, he does all of this stupid stuff where he's like testing it and doing all. At the same time, when he's apparently testing, to prove that it's a genuine entity, he's also trying to get information to get money and like work out the best path in life. Practically
and that's
speaking.
That's what Dee and Kelly did, also.
Yeah.
At one point, Kelly asked the angels to borrow money because they were denying him giving him money. So eventually, he's like, "Well, can I just borrow some, please?"
Well, there's supposed to be some continuity of character, isn't there, between these two figures? So
that's true. That's true. There you go. That's true. Yeah.
It would figure. Yeah, and then what he does is he receives this communication. Everything predicted happens with every working. Everything predicted happens, and then after it, he will talk about how people failed that he was working with, but the worst culprit is always himself because of a lack of faith. Every time with every one of his major workings, the Amalantra working, the Abul-Diz working, and so on, it's always his failure in terms of faith. And that pattern repeats itself. Anyway, faith and prophecy. This is where he lands, and Magick Without Tears at the end of his life. But his view of things remains remarkably consistent, despite again people saying that it changes a lot. From the get-go when he formulates the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. Why does he say that? Because he doesn't think you should waste your time speculating about the metaphysical nature of an angel. Only a moron would do that, right? That's what he thinks. And he said this is in 1906 when he formulates this, and he has the same view in 1940, towards the end of his life. By 1947 is when he dies. But I'm trying to think when he was writing the letters. It's like 1942 or whatever.
The major difference, if I remember, being that by Magick Without Tears, he's pretty canonically saying that Aiwass, or the Holy Guardian Angel, is an actual independent being.
Yes.
Rather than a psychological state.
Yes, but he never said it was a psychological state.
Okay.
This is a massive misunderstanding. So the reason why he says
that comes from, do you think that comes from his introduction to the Goetia, where he says the Goetia are parts of the human mind?
No. That introduction is pre-Book of the Law, right?
Okay.
So he's fashionably rational. He's interested in the brain for explaining things. He's the Buddhist. He's very
so basically very Reddit tier.
Yes. Yeah.
He's being very Reddit tier. Okay.
Yeah. So that's then. It's just before that image has been completely destroyed. Right. Everything after the Book of the Law is not a naturalist. He's not of that. Like you can't look at that early material and then think that's what he thought.
Interesting.
After it, he doesn't buy that. What he does is, this is his view. Okay, Holy Guardian Angel. Only an idiot would speculate metaphysically about the nature of an angel, but the people in the nearby village, in the Chinese village, they would know what that is. It's just a being who's an angel. So from the get-go, this is what he's saying. Now, he then says as well, however, that the angel lives in the unconscious. He doesn't mean that it's psychological. In the sense of the soft psychology that we have now, right? If you go back to the founders of psychoanalysis, certainly for Carl Jung, let's go with Carl Jung, right? Who he read. He read The Psychology of the Unconscious. The unconscious has an objective structure. This is Carl Jung's famous collective unconscious, right? Objective. A reality of its own. For Crowley, unconscious meant just that which we are not aware of. Right?
Okay.
It's just, right.
Okay.
But the angel is an objective being, right? In Jung's secret encounter with his own angel, he also describes it as an objective being, and he finds it terrifying when he has his encounter with Philemon. And even with Crowley, though, he thinks Jung doesn't even go far enough. So for Crowley, in your unconscious is who and what you really are, that incarnated with a will. That's in your unconscious, right? There isn't this. Sometimes you can get this idea that if we're waking up, we're going up, to a super consciousness. But we can go down into the unconscious and look at the psychological stuff. This is all wrong. The thing that you're looking for, this super consciousness thing, if we're going to use that terrible term, it's in the unconscious. You have to go in there and you'll find it right at the bottom. right? Like a treasure. That's what you have to do. So Crowley's view was there's an unconscious, and the
Do you
angel
think
is an
that
object.
mechanism that you just described is why the teaching has to be veiled in darkness? Because you can't, like in order to get to the goal, you have to descend through the unconscious.
I think. Yeah, I was going to say, I think with Crowley's work, there is a specific element to it, which is it is intentionally veiled, so that its unveiling demonstrates its reality.
Interesting.
Like Crowley, you won't know this stuff. You won't know all the mysteries. You're never going to. You will look like you're fallen, but the truth is you're lifted up. Right. I think that's a very specific veiling there, because there's you can have this idea of veiling teachings, but the truth is even in the ancient world they didn't really do that. Even like in Egypt, where they used where they would write things in code on a wall or whatever, it was more like a casual puzzle that a reader could they called it enigmatic writing. You could crack it yourself. It wasn't that difficult, and its function was really to demonstrate what it was like for the sun to set or to rise. It's like by figuring it out and then seeing what it describes, the action of interacting with it demonstrates the content of the writing. It's like that. And the easiest way to veil anything is to write it in plain language, and people won't read it. They'll veil it for themselves.
Yes.
Which is true for most of the stuff I'm saying about Crowley now. All of this, most of the stuff that I'm talking about is written in plain English for everyone to see.
Well, he's constantly, I mean, if you even look at it as, the secret thread of his life is him enacting the drama of the initiation into the secret order. He's pretty upfront about, like, he's saying that all throughout his writing, and that everything is for the angel, and that he's constantly talking about that. But the thing with Crowley that I thought about is, if you're working with shadow, if you're working with the also that I'm thinking about now, if you're working with the shadow, if you're working with the unconscious and what's been repressed, what is people's normal way of interfacing with that or not interfacing with it is to project it onto other people.
Yeah.
Right. So it's to produce the scapegoat.
Which brings us to Rigardi.
Oh, good. Okay. But you can also see that Crowley basically took on intentionally with his working with the media the role of the scapegoat, because the curse there is also, like, because he's so sensational. I think we talked about this in the last podcast. He's not going to be forgotten. It's almost like etching himself, or like tagging his name on forever on a symbol that people use as the projection of their shadow of that which they do not understand. Anyways, interesting.
Yes. So speaking of projection, and there's an irony of accusing people of it whilst doing it yourself, right? Which is, I'm not speaking about you. I mean, this is what Rigardi does. This is what Rigardi does. They had a contentious relationship. Did Crowley and Rigardi. Rigardi was a young man. He was like 20 when he started working with Crowley. He was much older. And Crowley found Rigardi's covering over of his Jewish heritage. He found that cowardly. He found it. He had problems with that. It was like, you should be hiding who you are.
Yeah.
Right. You shouldn't be hiding who you are. And Rigardi changed his name. I think it was
Rigardi.
Yeah. So he changed his name. He was trying to look less Jewish and so on and so forth. And Crowley, but the way Crowley went about it wasn't just to say this to him directly. He would just make sort of jokes offhand and whatever, right? And this wasn't taken. I think there's one particular joke that didn't sit very well with Rigardi, and then Rigardi wrote him this response that was what he called him, "Dear Alice," You're such a bitch. And so on, right? And this soured their relationship, and it started to fall apart. And then Crowley did this thing. I mean, there was no one like Crowley for a burn, for a roast, to roast someone.
Man.
He wrote this funny letter, which it just turns out, if you can find the letter online, right, where he writes this letter and he circulates it around, and it's about Regardie. You read it, and it is extremely funny. It is extremely funny. But it turns out that all the events in the letter actually happened, which is funny. I'll leave it as a surprise for you if you're going to hunt it down and read it.
Can you give us a preview?
It's like contracting gonorrhea and
Crowley or
Regardie.
Oh wait, this is the one where like didn't Crowley say something to Regardie that was like, you can't become a magician until you've slept with 1,000 people, and then he went out and contracted gonorrhea.
I don't know about the first part. Definitely the second part happened.
I remember reading the first part for sure. So
it was after he'd been with Crowley as well. He'd sort of left, and then he sort of he went working with, I think it was Dion Fortune. I think he went and did some stuff with anyway. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, one wonders what the differences in the internships of Regardie and Kenneth Grant were at times. Like, did Crowley change his approach with the young guys? Like,
I mean, with Kenneth Grant. Oh no! I mean, the thing he says to Kenneth Grant directly, "This is your problem. Like, you constantly go off into a pipe dream, and you just can't. Like, reality isn't good enough for you. You can't help yourself, right?" And this is when he's talking about the lamb portrait, by the way, as well. Which then Grant probably goes off and makes up this story about a trans-Plutonian entity, and based on the drawing. And it's like proof important. Anyway, what was I saying? So with Regardie, they had this bad relationship, and then Regardie doesn't have any significant experience with the practices that with Crowley's practices, with the results of those practices. And he's into psychoanalysis. He gets into that. That's his shtick. That's what he does. And then he does this thing where he is very extraordinarily passive aggressive revenge on Crowley, which is, okay, I'm going to talk in a level way, right? In a very reasonable, compassionate way about Crowley, right? I'm going to be very fair about Crowley. Sometimes he was a very nice man, et cetera, et cetera. But he's doing that to then smuggle in his psychoanalysis, right?
Okay.
And his psychologizing of all of it. The book, the point of Magick, all of this stuff. And this is why we end up with this view that the angels, this soft psychological, it's all subjective. It's the content of his mind. Unfortunately, Regardie never came into contact with the reality that Crowley, that destroyed Crowley's life, when he received the Book of the Law. And that's, that is what it is. But if psychology is your shtick, that's fine, but it's not magic.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, this is the perennial issue with people who are into Carl Jung. It's you get stuck in the abyss of psychologizing everything.
Well, unfortunately, the same thing happened to Carl Jung. Remember, yes. Yeah, his thing is objectivity, objective experience in the unconscious. He had an angel. He experienced deification with the same deity Crowley experienced deification with in the Book of the Law.
What do you mean same? And what are you basing that on?
The same deity. So, so I mentioned in the PGM, in the Greek magical papyri, in that tradition, you would use a number of names for the same god, right? And there's an incredible wisdom in that, because it points to a living reality beyond the appearance, right? But it doesn't mean it's all nebulous mush and they're interchangeable, right? It'd be pointing to the same reality. The spell that Crowley was using had two mistranslations, right? One of them was changing the word headless to bornless.
Right? Sorry, the word what?
Headless to bornless. The I invoke, the headless one, the akephalos. It's called the akephalos, the headless one.
Crowley was the one who changed that?
No, Mathers.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that, because it's like, headless or born. Headless might be interpreted to mean headless as in void state of consciousness, or the ego is gone. Now you're headless. right? Your head
Yeah,
is not shattering. And the bornless one it sounds more Buddhist even. It's like very much like, what was your face before you're born?
yeah. Well, it'd been
Question
changed.
in a way.
It had been changed to bornless, and I think that was to fit with some kind of conception of the divine fire. Whatever. But it'd been changed to bornless, right? So Crowley's got in, it's bornless one. It should have been headless, the Kephalos. Now, who is the headless one? We know who the headless one is now. It's Ray Osiris. The other mistranslation comes at the end, and it was Crowley's favourite phrase for describing the Holy Guardian Angel. And indeed, one of his holy books is titled with this phrase. My name is a heart girt with a serpent. I am the grace of the world. You familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Viper LXV.
Yes, except it's mistranslated. It's I am the favour of the Ion. Or Ion, some people say, but Ion, right? Ion is a very particular god. So it's a conception of, it's the same god, right, that he's invoking with this spell. Ion was the name used for the supreme god by the Chaldeans, by Julian the Theogist. That was their supreme god, Ion. Ion is the supreme god of the Hermeticists. So the Hermetica, he's in there. Ion is the supreme god of the Gnostics. I see a pattern emerging. Ion is synonymous with the Ancient of Days in the Old Testament.
And it's also a very good Dead Can Dance album.
Nice. So, yes. So,
we're being exhaustive.
Yes. Now, Ion is sometimes associated with the deity that you find in Mithraism, the deity that looks like a lion, right, with a serpent, and so on.
Yeah, I have it on this ring right here, actually.
Yeah,
it's probably blurred out. You can't see it, but yeah, Abraxas.
Yeah, Abrasax is the same. That name is in the spell. It's the same god. Okay. It's the same god.
Well, it's also in Liber Samek.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, well, it's from the Liber Samek is from this spell. It's from that material.
What do you think of the translations of the things that look like translations in Liber Samek, where you have the barbarous supposed words on the left, like Abrasax, and then on the right, Crowley has added his translations, like "Oh Satan, my savior," and that type of thing. What do you make of that?
So Crowley he doesn't know this stuff that I'm saying now, right? They didn't have access to that in terms of the scholarship at the time. He didn't know any of this stuff, but he was ever the empiricist. So and this was his main thing. Even if he did have access to this stuff, the empiricism is more important. So he's going to do the magic and then see what happens. So he's yes, the name, like knew it, had it, Ra Kuit, right? Just there we go in the book of the law. They're not accurate, but it's true. But they're true. Like they're dealing with a reality. I think the same is true with other stuff that he did. So whether it's attributions to do, in Liber 777, putting the correspondences together, whether it's his Kabbalistic workings to make an idea coherent for a ritual, and like the thing you just mentioned, where he's looking at these names and he's trying to translate them. I think as a working magician, there's probably some kind of empirical thread for him doing so, which you could argue is more important than whether or not it's an accurate translation.
What would that argument be? Because it's obvious. It's so obviously not a translation. It's just him kind of riffing and adding words that he thinks are. It looks like him just putting in what he wants to be there.
Yes, but I would argue it's not arbitrary.
Okay, so that's my question. He's not doing it. The part that is not arbitrary, what is that? That's my question.
Well, at this point, by the time he's got to that version of Liber Samek, he's been doing this spell for a long time. So he's changing it as it goes along. He'll swap in certain words. He starts to bring in some Thelemic terms. So he's putting it all together with his experience, and that's informing it. So I think it's just informed experience for, and he's assigning words to it that captures something that he thinks is real about that.
I mainly ask this because this is central to your argument in where you're talking about him going over to the devil and the teaching being veiled in darkness. What is the point? Because people have consistently, and I've asked other people this. People have consistently freaked out about that. It's like, you have an invocation for an angel. Why are you saying, Satan is your master? What's all this satanic stuff in there? So I asked Jim Eshelman this, and he said, well, you don't have to use that stuff, which I suppose is true, but doesn't really get to the heart of the matter.
I've just remembered. Let me just finish this. Just a point I was making about Jung deification. When Jung started his own red book, right, that's like Liber Legis, right? He called it Liber Novus, the new book, the end of an age, start of another one, right? When he wrote that, he experienced deification, right? It's with the god Ion, right? Crowley's experience with Samadhi, it's with the god, the supreme god of that spell that he's using. It's the same deity. How do we get to Rahal Kuit? I'll just say this: that deity was understood. It had a number of names, but it's the giant deity, the eastern horizon, feet in hell, head in heaven, right? Just before the sun rises. And I reference a guy called Darnell who decoded some of these enigmatic texts on these tomb walls in Egypt from Thebes, which is where Ankaf and Khonsu, by the way, was from, right? And this is how we know who Re Osiris is, or the headless one is. Right, it's from this work. It was only in like 2012, 2013, something like that, when this stuff was published. He thinks what best sums up the attributes of this giant deity, right, is a hymn from that period, from Thebes, whatever, and it's a hymn to Re Hareketi, Rahal Kuit. So again, right. So we're getting it's the same deity.
So just to recap, so the headless one is a invocation to Rahal Kuit.
You could say that's
nuts.
Yes.
That's nuts.
This is what I'm saying. There's a coherence.
That's nuts.
Yes, there is a coherence.
I love that. That tracks because it has the feeling, and I say that not because of the information, but because it has the feeling of when something finally clicks in Magick, where it's just like, oh yeah, like that. That explains that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I'm communicating that very clearly, but. That is, well, it is very, I think the mind certainly seeks coherence and symmetry and wants things to make sense and put together. So maybe it's just that. Maybe it's pleasing because it now makes the puzzle make a bit more sense.
Or the puzzle made sense in the first place, right? It was veiled.
Let's hope, yeah. It's not Transugothian.
It's all documented. There it is. In the essay, there's the evidence. There is a reality that is coherent under the surface that he didn't know about, but it's there.
Okay, so now that we've got to this point in the conversation where you're kind of doing essentially the setup for that, go back and in plain English describe straightforward and on the nose. What is that thing that's there?
The thing that's there is a magical prophetic tradition that has a being of its own. It's divine wisdom itself. It moves in the world. It goes east. It goes west. Wherever it goes, it starts traditions. It's not bound by any human institutions. It's the origin of culture itself. It's not just those traditions. And it's
where is it said that it pointed to it that it's the origin of culture as well? Excuse me.
So the Book of Law is a good example, but the laws that we live by, right? There was an ancient understanding, right, in the world, which is this tradition. What did it do? A prophet, magician, healer. All these different names, right? Lawgiver. What would they do? They would go and travel to the underworld. Sometimes they would see a goddess, sometimes a god, whatever it might be. They would come back with divine laws.
Which sometimes also is prophecy. The classic shamanic thing. It's the classic shamanic journey into the underworld.
the divine laws that would societies would be constructed on the lines of those laws. Think about that. Now, we know that this is true. This is a fact. It was all over the Mediterranean.
Well, the first thing I thought of when you said that is, you take the Book of the Law. I mean, the Book of the Law, I think, is a fairly good descriptor of the modern world. If you look at a world where everyone's famous on YouTube and it's basically a thelemized culture where it's every man and woman is a star. Yes, at the very opposite end of what you're talking about with Egyptian magic, at the most basic level. Right,
it was a shadow of
it. Resonance. It's a shadow still, yeah.
Shadow of it.
But it's almost like the watch has changed upstairs.
Yeah, so like Crowley's the idea of on the face of it, someone who's presenting a law on behalf of a different reality, and it's saying this is how reality is. This is how you should conduct yourself. Now you can choose to follow it or not, but if you don't follow it, these are the consequences. Right? Now, the consequences, it's either real or it isn't, right? It's either real or it isn't. You can pretend it's there or not.
What have you found in your life? What do you think?
Well, I mean, if we zoom out, what about this? Because you mentioned the culture that we live in. Civilization ended in 1904. That's true. Civilization died. That was the end of it. Before that, we had a type of civilization, for the most part, characterized by monarchy, right? A particular way of living. They all disappear at that point. Well, we have our revolutions, or sometimes it's more of a gradual thing where the monarchy loses its power or whatever.
Sometimes it's not so gradual. Yeah.
Yeah. We have then a descent into 2 world wars. The trauma from which we have still not recovered from. Or won't even talk about. We can't even imagine that we have generational trauma from such a thing. It's made us sick, where we are psychologically ill-disposed, right? The descent hasn't stopped. We think it has, right? It hasn't stopped. We had the catastrophe of the world wars.
Yeah, you have relative family who were in those wars?
I'm not living. No, I have no.
No, I don't mean living necessarily, but it's like when you say trauma, like ancestral trauma, like is there an epigenetic line for you?
Oh, not necessarily. I mean, just
there is
even,
for me actually. So
but just you can't escape it, even if you didn't have someone genetically in that war.
Like, so even it will like so basically, so we're not talking about epigenetics. We're talking about culture. Like it formed the context of everything.
Absolutely everything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So how can I describe this? So we had those wars. It was Christian nations that did that to each other. How do you explain it? The atrocity was so extraordinary. I'm not sure we fully appreciate how bad it was. Like
how could we? I mean, there's no reference point for it in it's been a while, so I used to every single podcast mention this book, Bloodlands by Timothy Snyder, who has been involved in the Ukraine conflict, but it's a historical record of the geographical region between Germany and Russia during the 1930s and 1940s. So Ukraine, Belarus, Poland mostly, and basically looks at these places as first we're subject to the forced famine by Stalin, and then we're subject to the Holocaust. And it's within this area that the most trauma and the most killing and the most awfulness of the war happened. And if you were just looking at it from space and not seeing the sides, it would just be people just dying in the worst possible ways. And just, reading that book and reading the accounts of things that were going on, it's like, it's truly not unimaginable, or like the rape of Nanking or something like that. Yeah. It's like, I think most modern people, unless they have been in a war, which unfortunately is becoming more common again, I don't think somebody could have a context for really that. I mean, you can imagine it, but what is that? How could that possibly ever get close?
Yeah, but the descent has continued. So, the world order that was established after the Second World War is, you can see it. There's, when I talk about psychological sickness, it's like there's, how can I put this? Did you see the recent interview that Douglas Rushkoff did with Grant Morrison?
How recent?
Like the most recent?
I listened to the one that they did like 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, there's another recent one. There's one by Daniel Pinchbeck recently as well. He came out of the woodwork. Well, this will be lost on you then. But let's put it this way. Let's put it this way, right? In the end of the Second World War, right, the Allies defeated the evil Nazis, right, fascists, right. This is what comes out of it. Star Wars. Star Wars is a great example of the kind of cultural myth that we've lived in since the end of that Second World War, right? Right. If you were to line them up, right, who would the Allies be in Star Wars?
Well, presumably the Rebel Alliance, right, fighting
right,
the very
the
Nazi,
ragtag Rebel
the very
Alliance,
Nazi
yes,
code, the extremely
yes.
Nazi coded.
Yeah,
it's like that's the thing about the Nazis. Like this one group of people for all time are now synonymous with evil bad guy.
Well, they were then. That might be changing. So
that's a whole other. That's a whole other. Yeah, okay.
Well,
that's a
yes.
Whole other.
So the obviously then there's the evil empire, right? It was the British who said no to the Nazis, right? It was the British who fought, part of the Allies, right? Then America, it's the Anglos, right? We're going to stop the Nazis. Yeah, right. These are the Allies. Right. Who's the bad guy in Star Wars? Who the evil empire, right? They've all got British accents.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Yes, there's a very peculiar thing in my country. Yeah, there's a very peculiar thing in my country, which is there is a flag for England, and up until recently, because of this eruption from the unconscious, right, things that get repressed, you could never fly that flag. It was always associated with Nazis, which is very curious when you think about it, because it's England that says no to the Nazis, right? Why is this? It's because what happened was so atrocious, and we did it. We are simultaneously the heroes and the villains at the same time. Like, we are suspicious of anything approaching identity to do, like being a European. Get very suspicious of it because of what happened, right? So what are we? We are like rebels against our own nature. You could put it something like that, right? We're constantly tearing it down, this kind of a thing. A very peculiar ethnic orientation. No one else has it in the world. It's very bizarre. But here's the thing. This is the thing. The Allies won. America won, didn't they? Second World War, yeah. American Empire, right? The Allies are the American Empire, right? The rebels are the American Empire. I'm saying that because what we don't grasp, and people aren't going to like this, I know. The reason I mentioned Grant Morrison, and I love Grant Morrison's stuff, like, so I'm not, having a dig at him per se. He has this position that's very popular, which is you're looking at these evil Nazis, the evil Nazis running the countries, like they're taking us into wars, all of these things, right. And we need to fight them and do the magic stuff and whatever. We're the rebels, aren't we? And then he's talking about how the future is we're all going to merge together with machines and all become one, and so on. And the vanguard of our culture, the vanguard of the American Empire.
The communist backdoor into transhumanism or vice versa.
Well, the transhumanism thing, whether you see it that way through machines, whether you see it through, I don't know, some kind of global awakening or something like this, right? This vanguard of our culture, often associated with being left-wing, right? And what, magicians, we're there on the vanguard, aren't we? Leading the way, right? This is what we do. And we're fighting the bad guys, and we're going to make the world a better place. Except it is the same thing as the empire. It's the same. Well, I mean, if you wanted to use the term colonialism, right? It's colonialism. Peter Kingsley made this point in a book of his. It is this, how we think we're the leading edge of evolution, the good guys, simultaneously with the worst people to have ever existed.
Yeah,
simultaneously.
It's right? a certain skill at just making everything, like sucking the oxygen out of the room and making everything about you.
Right, right. Yes, all the inflation is extraordinary.
The whole rebel identity, like, of course, which is Star Wars is all about that. If you're talking about this as a cultural myth, I mean, it's like you can look at the 60s as people struggling with, and not just the 60s, the decade, but the 60s, the boomers, the generation, like kind of struggling with that image of having to bear that image of being rebels to the, and now it's like, there's no one left to rebel against. You have this with like Hillary Clinton saying that, that she's the resistance in the 2016.
Well, there was that extraordinary inversion, wasn't there, where all of the mega corporations, transnational capital, they're all woke. Do you remember that? DEI comes from BlackRock. Like it is the empire. Like you can't. When things end, you'll see them come together, and they reveal what they actually are.
Well, I suppose that's also just a classic tactic of power, though, would be to co-opt your own opposition. 1984
for sure, but the idea of exporting the way that we think to everyone in the world, right? Whether you think of that as we're all going to merge together into a machine, or I don't know, there'll be some kind of global awakening, spiritual awakening, just happens to be the kind of spiritual awakening we're into, or I don't know, we'll all become progressive, or whatever it might be.
Right.
This is expansionism. This is what the empire is. This is.
That's what people said about the internet. Also, there was this Buddhist gloss on that era where it's like we're all going to, adopt technology and become one, and our minds are going to be shared. Well, it's like now that exists, and you can't escape it. You can't get away from it. You get to know what everyone thinks about everything, and it's just like basically, it's like the reality didn't check out with the ideal. You got exactly what you wanted. You got exactly what you wanted.
So true. So many things.
Yeah, the reality did not match the ideal.
Anyway, so the sickness, we have this weird sickness, but that's now coming to an end. That's now coming to an end. The American Empire is coming to an end. That's obvious, isn't it, for anyone to see?
But the British defeatism. Goddamn, what was I about to say?
I mean that.
Speaking of defeat,
I was going to say, I mean that it's American hubris, which is.
Oh yeah, no, unrepentantly so. Like just unrepentant ridiculousness, just like Ronald Reagan, Rambo. Anyways, so okay, but I don't want you to lose the point. So you're talking about Grant Morrison and Doug Rushkoff. And I don't want you to lose that point, and I also don't want you to lose the point about what was it that you just said, coming back to or the World War II like trauma fading, or the memory of it fading.
I was trying to say, so we've had this 80-year empire cultural orientation, which is a weird dissociative repressed kind of identity crisis or something like this, right? That's now a lot of that stuff that's been repressed is now erupting, as you can see. The descent is continuing with civilization. So, I mean, you don't have to be, you don't have to have prophetic powers to see that we're at the end of a civilization. So you could read someone like Oswald Spengler. But everything is happening that you would expect to happen. So I've just mentioned the end of the American Empire. I mean, the American Empire is the extreme end result of Western civilization. It's what it's led to. And now it is coming to an end. It will be a big fall. I think it will be traumatic.
See, Alan. I live in Texas, you remember.
Well, I hope you're okay in Texas. But it's over.
We'll see.
And I do actually, because you can do the geopolitical reading. You can look
at the
American
Eagle is also, or the American Eagle is also the Falcon Horus.
Perhaps, but this is what we were talking about. We were talking about the beginning of a new age, because you mentioned people being famous and so on, like a star. Right. But I was trying to say this, and this was Crowley's view, right? He says this as well. But also you see other people like Jung and whatever, having a similar view, which is we are only seeing the end of what came before, and we're still seeing it. We're still seeing it.
Right.
Everyone thinks. No one knows the way forward. People are desperately trying to find a way forward. All we can do is look back to things.
Yeah. Okay. So the last time we talked, you had mentioned something that I wanted to come back to in this conversation.
Right.
which fits in with what you're saying, which is that you had a sense that Christianity had been the dharma, if you will, for the West, but that the ball had been dropped on it in some way, and that essentially the West had lost its spiritual tradition. So I want to ask that in context with this, in terms of, should we be looking backwards to what was lost, or is there actually like a new aeon being born? And if so, what is that process going to look like over the next 19 years?
I wanted to say this. Everything is coming to an end. We keep looking back for answers as a way forward. None of those will work. There is no other way forward. The only thing that can help us go forward is the divine. It does it for us. It's the only way through at the end of a civilization. There are lots of old myths about this. So we don't know what's going to come next. We are surrounded by the detritus of a dying civilization. Everything that we might think is the new age is not the new age at all. It will be centuries before that stuff comes along. And what will the stuff be? It will be something that will spring from what we can gather together and carry through the maelstrom that's coming, right? The gathering together of all the stuff that I've been talking about. Like, what is this lineage that Crowley belonged to? What is it? That's the source of culture. That's where civilization comes from. There is no solution in the past. I mean, it's striking that all of our hopes now are resting on something called AI. And what is AI? It is a churning of everything we've ever produced. Right, we're just ramming everything on the internet.
Enough, it's
right,
the past.
Yeah, we think if we cram it all through some gaming PCs, we will get something new will emerge, and all it is it's like cultural fracking. I don't know if that's the right word for it, right term for it. And I probably didn't come up with it, but that's what we're trying to do. And what do we get? We get a completely dead, uncreative, right, parody of our past. That's what we get as an answer that pops out. An hallucination pops out, and what's it an hallucination of? Everything that we are, the thing that we really want, we project it onto that, and what is it? It's something to come and save us, isn't it? Mm-hmm. There's nothing left. We've got nothing left. What's going to save us? We've made this machine, right, that's collected everything we've ever said or done, and we're hoping that we'll be able to merge with it, right. And that will be the way through. This was Grant Morrison was saying this. This is where we're going, and it sounds like it's it doesn't sound great, but it'll be good in the end. Something like that. And this to me is just that idea that we're all going to merge. Everyone in the whole world, we're all going to merge together with this, with technology and become one. But then
you're stuck with everyone in the whole world. And I actively try to avoid almost
and they're stuck with
pretty much everyone other than like a handful of people on this planet.
I was just saying the truth is none of that's going to happen. The American economy is like, have you seen how much of the American economy is AI companies moving money around? To give the illusion where there's growth where there isn't any.
Is that true?
Yeah.
To give the illusion that there's economic activity?
Yeah, where there isn't any. It's something like 30% of the market or something like that. It's crazy.
We're going to end up becoming like a planned economy, but by AI.
It's all, no, that's all going to go away. It's all going to go away.
What's going to go away?
All of that. Right, we're not. This is the future. Is this right? That we're not going to merge with machines. There won't be any AGI. We're not going to Mars. All that stuff will collapse, and then the New World Order will mostly be nationalist theocracies.
That's certainly one future, and I think Crowley said that the Anaporis could become the vibrant New Age or the New Dark Age.
Yes, but this is what always happens at the end of civilizations.
Yes, but then new ones are born, in the Spenglerian sense as well.
Yeah. I mean,
right? Why wouldn't things be impermanent? But it just becomes the compost from which new civilizations emerge.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we're about to find out, when there's rolling blackouts and energy rationing and famine, and drought in various parts of the world as a result of what's currently going on. I mean, some things aren't going to come back. Some things won't be coming back, and the escalation will continue to escalate. And that is the end of, I'm sorry to say, is the end of the American Empire. There is no off-ramp.
You haven't even seen our final form. We're just phase changing.
And I will say this, because I mean, you're the right person. If I was going to share this with anyone, I'd share, you're the right person, the right audience. I have had a vision of the end of America that did happen. I shared it on a podcast that I did.
What was your vision?
I'll tell you now, yeah. I think maybe it was 2 years ago I shared it. I sat on it for a while because it's like, what does it mean? I'll just tell you what I saw, right? So first of all, the nature of the vision was very much, the sense was very much, you are now going to pay attention to this. And it was like being carried somewhere and then being shown this image. And this is what I saw. An American city, and the sun setting on this American city. It looks like New York, but it could be like an idealized American city. It's an American city, right? Not much traffic on the road, and the sun is setting. And then in the distance, what looked like just a black sky. It turns out actually no, there is like a bar of black cloud in the distance, and then instantaneously, all of a sudden, it engulfs the city, right? And there is a woman screaming. She's kneeling down behind a car, and I had a taste of the emotional trauma from the event, whatever the event is, a little bit. It was like being allowed to taste a little bit of it, but not enough that it would traumatize me.
Okay.
Right? And as she's screaming, there is stuff falling down from the sky that looks like snow or fallout. Now, that was it, right? I was shown that, and I thought, why have I been shown that? What is the point of that? And what does it mean? So, of course, you could just take the analogical view and say the end of the American way of life will be a dramatic fall, right? The fallout from which, will be very difficult to deal with. You could look at it like that, right?
There's actually going to be nuclear fallout.
Well,
yes.
I sat on it for a while, and then there was another experience. It's very difficult for me to describe that, so I won't try. But it implied what the practical details were, which made me think, no, something terrible is going to happen in New York that will mark the end. I flip-flopped between these two. Sharing it, I hated the fact, after I'd shared it on this podcast, I shared it because I knew the second time when this other thing happened, I'm supposed to talk about it now. I'm supposed to say it. I don't have any answers as to what that means. I'm sorry for saying it to people if it alarms them. I just know that I saw that, and then I was instructed to share it. My what can I say? My wisest orientation to that, if I can use that phrase, is, if it is wise, the best I have is if we know that such a thing is possible, and we can prepare ourselves psychologically, right, and understand that it's not wanted for us, but this may be the turn of events, right?
It's absolutely possible.
Yeah,
it's easily avoided, but it's absolutely possible.
But possibly we can navigate through that in a better way than if we stick our head in the ground. So I mean, it will be a fact that if for the the different, because you've been to Europe and lived in the UK, haven't you? Our standard of living is not the same as the standard of living in America.
No.
People can find it difficult to appreciate how much more phenomenally wealthy Americans are compared to, say, Europeans. There's that stat, isn't there? It's like the average American uses 6 times the amount of energy that a European does.
Yeah.
It's a very different standard of living. And for that to suddenly disappear, there are people that would never adapt to that. It would be a catastrophe. An astonishing fall, yeah.
Well, I mean, you can argue that there's large chunks of the world that didn't adapt after the 2008 financial crash, or did not adapt after COVID.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
the world, talk about like we're still trying to get over World War II. Like
Yes.
all kinds
Yeah.
of stuff we're trying to get over.
Yeah. Well, I would say, it's the same descending path. It's just the same. It's the same thing.
So are we on the descending arc of the Yuga, or are we descending and ascending at the same time?
There is two, it's the end of a world. Regardless of, I could talk about the end of a civilization and being, a number of centuries, and you could talk about it on a certain scale. It is always the case that even just like, if you look at a single day, you can say it's the end of a world and the beginning of another one. Like the next 5 years will be something like the end of a world and the beginning of another one.
What do you think the world that's beginning is going to look like?
It will definitely be a move in that direction of nationalist theocracy, moving in that direction. Definitely in the direction of a drop in a standard of living for the world globally. I think by that time, within 5 years or something like that, what you know as the American Empire now will be gone. When I say
We'll
gone, I don't mean wiped off the map. I'm in a failed empire. I live in one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no longer.
Those who live in glass houses.
Yeah, you're like no longer the center of the world, no longer with the power that you had. Out of the Middle East, like just the petrodollar will be gone. I mean, like that, in that direction. I think that there will be civil war erupting everywhere in various different ways.
You mean globally or in America?
In America, but globally. So in Europe, all over the place. War, things falling apart.
Peter Gray mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
From Scarlet Imprint, where he thought there would be a civil war in Europe.
Oh, absolutely! It's too late to head that off. And the regime doesn't understand that the ground has changed underneath them, and they're, ideologically possessed. They can't see what's going on, and that's
So, if the core of Crowley's work is that essentially the AA is real and the source of all culture, or the Invisible College, which is borne out by, it's borne out by history. It's borne out by my life. I'm sure it's borne out by your life.
Yeah.
It's like, this is just how things work. Why does it work that way? I have no idea. But it's like Jen used to say, it's like, of course things work this way. Why would Crowley go, suddenly get the Goetia and the Headless One? Because of course he would. Why would he be approached by, the Golden Dawn and all that? So today, particularly as things become more and more chaotic, where do you have a sense of where that process is at, and where people, because now Crowley's writing is like 100 years old too, and it's coming out of copyright, and it will always be good, but it's not like mass instruction for the human race.
Yeah. So it's important to remember that if we think about the Book of the Law, I'll use that as the example because that's the one we're talking about. If we think about that as an orientation, it's like, where are we really? We're in the underworld, meaning we're not in the world where life really comes from, where being is, where consciousness is, right? It comes here as we incarnate, and we're here to do something, and then we go back to where life actually comes from. And if we're in the underworld, then there's this, then we can understand the process of incarnation as going through the stages that's described there. So we could remain asleep, right? And when we die at the end of our life, right, we die with the image, right? And that's the end of everything. Or we could decide to listen to something else that's beyond appearance. And by bringing consciousness to it, it's like expediting the process of incarnation, meaning we die whilst we're still alive. Mm-hmm. We can die whilst we're still alive. This is what samadhi is, what we talked about before in the conversation. Awakening, realization, these things, right? And therefore, we fulfill a role as part of creation. There's a place for us in the center of things where it's through our consciousness that we decide to do this. And each of us gets to decide whether the world continues or not, right? Whether our universe continues or not. That's what we get to decide to do. What I mean is that, like, if I decide there should be a new day, right? That creation should continue. I'm recapitulating creation, right, in my consciousness. And as a result of that, right, my world changes. My world changes as a result of that. The person next to me might decide not to do that. So they go in a different direction. And that's up to them. But whatever they decide to do, it won't change my choice. It won't change my choice. Now, of course, there's an interplay between our universes. We're in this, I'm not saying that we're just in separate bubbles and there's no contact. But I can be in heaven whilst you're in hell.
Yes.
And, sat next to each other on a bus. And the question is, which choice do we make? And we're all presented with the same choice. What do we believe appearances, or do we trust something else that we know to be true that's beyond appearances? And do we follow that instead? That's basically the choice that we have, and the only real choice we really have. Now, that's true for everyone, right? And it doesn't matter what state the civilization is in, right? That you just happen to be in at the time. Now, it's possible that if, let's say, we're at the beginning of a civilization or in the middle of it or something like that, enough of us say yes, right? Then we can say that there are particular fruits that are possible through that civilization or culture as a result of us doing that. If we're at the end of a civilization, you shouldn't have the idea that you can now undo the choices that have been made collectively to say, no, I'm not going to follow that other voice. Instead, I'm going to believe appearances. There's no point in thinking at the end of, while someone is about to die, right? Oh, they can start a new career. They didn't like the career they had. They can just go back and start a new career, and maybe they can, do something else with their lives. It's too late. They're dead. They're almost dead. What's appropriate now is that you care for the person that's dying. You're right. You give that consciousness, and So the question isn't so much what can you do individually, right, in terms of your own destiny, something like that. It's the same as it's always been, and there are many traditions and ways of approaching it. If you trust that voice that tells you there's something more than this, you'll be led to what's appropriate for you to follow, right? Of course, there's Magia. That's what I do. As one option there. In terms of what we can do collectively, though, what's possible? What's possible is the continuity. Is to take what we have, what's been made possible, right, and to carry it into what comes next.
Yeah.
Right, as a lineage, as an unbroken chain. Like the great work, which is really an inheritance from ancestors, magical ancestors going all the way back in time. They've added to it.
And mentors in this life, right, some of them are now dead. So and they've handed it on. They've handed it on, and it's our responsibility to take that forward, because it's from there that new things come, right? That's possible. So that's what I think about where we find ourselves and what's possible. But what I think is not possible is a global awakening. Where we all ascend to a different level. It's not going to be like a big ecstasy-fueled Burning Man cuddle party all over the world all at once.
No.
Very, very interesting. Crowley says at one point that the purpose of his work is to build an ark to save civilization, essentially, if it collapses.
Yeah.
And so, practically speaking, I mean, obviously we are both publicly teaching and doing stuff, but practically speaking, what do you think that means? Not, also for everyone listening.
Well, see, here's the thing. The only thing I can do is, and this is a repeated lesson, is listen to that other voice, follow that thread, right? And I just do what should be done next, because I have long ago accepted that I'm not wise enough to figure out what I should do. So, what have I done? There's the Magia book and the practices. Then I was supposed to found an order for training people with those practices to hand the practices on. Then I went into the Crowley stuff to reveal the truth about Crowley and the reality behind it, behind his life and work. And now this is coming to what can I say? That will develop over time with that. So there'll be a new edition of my book Magia with an exegesis that's been written. That will come out through my publisher at some point, like later this year, maybe early next year. I'll probably turn the essay that we've been talking about I'll probably just expand that into a book.
Oh, that would be phenomenal. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You should please do that.
Yes,
This was a real joy. It's a real joy to read your writing, and it's a real joy to read somebody who takes this stuff, like, not only takes it seriously and but can see through to the core essence, and also say something in a way that it hasn't been said before. So it was wonderful getting to read it.
Yeah, it's a joy to speak to someone who also shares the same, concerns. Who's actually finding it, who would find it interesting in the way you described.
So are we dead already?
Are we dead already?
The world? Are we dead already? Are we in the world of the underworld? Is this the Bardo that we're going through?
It is.
Is the dead man Onkoff Nakansu because Crowley is dead, because we're all dead? We're in the upside down world.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm waiting to see if your straight face cracks.
I don't have. This is my straight face.
Yeah, I'm checking. I'm just checking. Okay, so that is true.
Yes, it is true. Yeah. It transpires that this world is a shade, right, where we play out our false understandings of ourselves, right, where we will be judged, where we are judged, where we're presented with this option of a second death, right, and we can die with that image if we stay unconscious, or we can become conscious and walk this path that we've been talking about, which is synonymous with recapitulating creation. And as a result of that, it's possible to discover the other world that we've been talking about, being, right, where life actually is, what life really is, of which this world is just a shadow. We can discover that here. That's what realization is. That's what the second death is. We discover it here.
That was Alan Chapman. You can get his essay and his books at his website, Barbarous Words, at the link in the description. And of course, like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications button. Let us know what you thought about the essay in the comments, and we'll see you next time.